Hi, everybody, and welcome again to today's live streaming, 6 to 6:30 p.m. on weekdays. I'm here and I'm answering all your questions that you sent to me via email or leave in the comment section on Facebook. So, before I get started for today's topics, as you see, I've listed them here. One that is missing is about how the COVID-19 shutdown has affected our Vermont dairy farmers, and especially the point about overproduction and dumping of milk. I've reached out to my friend Peter Briggs, who owns a dairy farm in Addison County. He said he needs a little time. He's very busy on the farm, a little time to get back to me, and he wants to make sure that we don't politicize it. So I said, all right, well, there are other topics that we can talk about today, and I should have more on that topic with you very soon. So for today, what we're going to do to start off with is we're going to talk about hydroxychloroquine. This is a drug that we are hearing about every day in the media. And I'm going to try and make sense of the controversy surrounding this particular drug. So in my past episodes, I've talked about how this drug is actually a very common cure that is prescribed for malaria. And how I had to sort of realign myself in terms of how I'm viewing this particular drug. So, as many of you know, I went to medical school in rural southwestern India. And in India, malaria, like tuberculosis and other diseases, is endemic, which means the germ is always present. And so people living there are always facing it, and incidence of malaria is very common. So chloroquine, the original drug, and then various forms of it like hydroxychloroquine and newer analogs, newer versions, are very commonly prescribed. I mean, this is the go-to medicine for treating malaria, and it's as common and it sort of rolls off the top, the tip of your tongue, like ibuprofen or Tylenol. It's really, really common. So I needed a little time to just become aware of that, my own, comfort and familiarity with the drug, and understand how in a first world nation like the United States of America, where malaria is very uncommon and viewed as a foreign disease, chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine are not household drug names. They are in India, they are in parts of Africa, they are in all areas of the world where malaria is something that you have to fight every day. So here what we've seen a big fight in the media. One faction is talking about how hydroxychloroquine could be a breakthrough drug when it comes to treating COVID-19. And another group is, talks about this is a foreign drug, an unknown drug, an exotic, touting unsubstantiated claims about how it's effective. So we're seeing a lot of divide about that. And so I wanted to break it down and explain why there is merit to at least considering hydroxychloroquine. Okay, so malaria is caused by a parasite. It's known as Plasmodium vivax. It is not a virus. It is not a bacteria. It is a different kind of infectious organism. It is a single-celled creature called a protozoa, and it is carried in vectors or carriers, which are mosquitoes. And so in tropical areas, also areas where sanitation and hygiene is low, so you have a lot of puddles and ponds everywhere, basically water bodies that are uncleaned and are sort of left out in the open. They are breeding grounds for mosquitoes. And with the rainy season, for example, there's a monsoon season in India, and especially in rural areas, there's a lot of ponds and little puddles that grow, and you can see this kind of becomes a breeding ground for malaria to spread, and that's why it's endemic, because it's always a feature of that particular environment. So what does this drug do? Well, the the virus, let's talk about our cell. Let's look at it as a human cell. Okay, so before we come to the virus, let me explain what happens in malaria. So, well, the Plasmodium vivax, the protozoa, infects the cell, especially our red blood cells, and it starts eating up the hemoglobin, and it spreads to that. And so chloroquine is designed to prevent the spread of that particular protozoa, parasite. So the question, and people who don't like hydroxychloroquine or who have a problem with that, well, their basic argument is COVID-19 is caused by a virus. It's called the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Why are you using a drug that is not an antiviral drug against this particular organism? So why are you doing that? And yes, that's a valid question. However, when studies have been done, we don't have mass clinical trials. We have small clinical trials. But what we have seen is that for some strange reason, we don't know why, but hydroxychloroquine, or this anti-malarial drug, is effective, or it has shown in small clinical trials to be effective in stopping the replication of this virus, of the COVID-19 virus. Even though it was not designed to fight viruses, it's able to do it. And how is it able to do it? Well, when this drug is prescribed, when hydroxychloroquine is described, it changes the pH of the cell, of the human cell. It lowers the pH, it changes the cellular environment. It also, in some studies, brings zinc, pulls zinc into the cell. And it does all these things. By doing all these things, it stops the virus from replicating. Now, let's talk about a virus. What is a virus? A virus is not a living organism. It doesn't live. It on its own, it can't replicate. It's a very ancient organism, and it requires human cells to replicate. So when we are infected with the virus, it goes into our cells, and then it hijacks the human cellular mechanism, and it co-opts it or takes it over and starts using all the processes of our cell to its benefit. And it only has one benefit. What is that? One goal, which is to replicate. And it multiplies at such a crazy level that the cell might even explode in some cases, and it just multiplies to an extent where then you fall ill. So hydroxychloroquine has shown that it can change the cellular environment and stop COVID-19 virus from replicating. Now, this has not been done on a large clinical trials, but it has shown efficacy in small clinical trials, and there are two aspects of it. One is that it has shown efficacy, so it has prevented the virus from replicating, and as a result, the patient's symptoms have all but disappeared. And the second is that its safety profile is acceptable, which means that it doesn't cause very bad, side effects that are not manageable, or any side effects in some cases. So you need two things. You need sufficient efficacy, and you need an acceptable safety profile. And in small clinical trials, these have been done in China, in Europe, these two parameters have been fulfilled. And so as a result, there is, I would say, an argument to be made for trying out hydroxychloroquine, especially in patients who are severely ill. So, and now at this point, I want to be very clear that I'm not saying, and no doctor is saying, that we should just prescribe this medicine widespread. No. Whenever you have to deal with trying a new form of treatment, this is new. As I said, there are not large clinical trials proving it. So there's good science, but not great science to prove that this is the way to go. When that is the case, then it really falls on the discretion of the doctor. You have to examine the individual patient profile of each person that you're dealing with. You have to take into consideration the patient's prior clinical history, family history, drug reactions, underlying conditions, age, gender, in some cases even ethnicity. You have to look at all these factors You have to look at the severity of the disease and make a call which is specific and tailored to the patient. And this, of course, this is no one can do it except for the attending physician. But having said that, it doesn't mean that you can have a blanket everybody do it or a blanket nobody do it coming from the government, coming from a non-physician entity. You can't have that. That doesn't work. So you absolutely need, I would say in this case, the burden of this, falls on the individual doctor assessing each patient and then deciding, okay, is this the way to go forward or not? So this is known as off-label prescription. So in the US, for example, hydroxychloroquine has been approved by the FDA for two purposes. One is malaria, and the second one is rheumatoid arthritis. So certain autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, it is useful in alleviating symptoms. Those are the two, those would be called on label. It's not called on label, but that's what it's prescribed for according to FDA guidelines. But off-label prescriptions are very common in the practice of medicine, where basically some drugs they haven't been approved, but as I said, there is good science backing up efficacy, showing that there is efficacy and the safety profile is acceptable, which means that there are not adverse side effects, bad side effects that are happening. And in that case, on a patient by patient basis, doctors can prescribe a particular medicine off label. It's called off label. So we have seen this happen in the United States, and we've seen right from New York City to Utah to Nevada, where the governor there has said, oh no, you can't be prescribing hydroxychloroquine. But even there, we've seen doctors prescribe this to patients who present with very severe COVID-19 symptoms, and they've seen considerable improvement. So I would say simply this, that it is not an exotic random drug. It is absolutely not an unproven, unsubstantiated drug, and politicizing it is unacceptable. Unfortunately, I've seen some doctors in Vermont dismiss it altogether, and to me, that amounts to medical malpractice. Because if there is any chance that this drug can bring about alleviation of symptoms, and there is now enough of a record to show that it has proved this, there is absolutely no reason for a medical professional to dismiss it just on a blanket dismissal. That's not okay. Now, you may not want to prescribe it, but you can't say, oh, this is nonsense or this is unsubstantiated. That's absolutely not the case. As I said, there are small clinical trials, and there's growing evidence that this does help some patients alleviate symptoms. Now, you will also hear that hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, sometimes you've heard that name. Now, azithromycin is an antibiotic, and in some patients, when you are dealing with hydroxychloroquine, as I've explained, it helps to stop the virus from replicating. And this is especially useful in patients who have a severe form of the illness and they develop pneumonia. Now, why does that happen? Because the SARS-CoV-2 virus destroys the lung cells, and it destroys them, it makes them susceptible, and then they get inflamed and infected, leading to pneumonia. Azithromycin is an antibiotic which is very good in treating pneumonia. So in some patients who have pneumonia, doctors supplement the hydroxychloroquine with azithromycin to treat the pneumonia. And so I would say this is my assessment of the controversy. Now, on this point, I will mention that the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson was admitted to the hospital on Sunday. He has, as you know in the news, that he tested positive for coronavirus. He wasn't able to shake off his very high fever. He also had labored breathing, so difficulty in breathing. So they hospitalized him on Sunday. His symptoms deteriorated very rapidly, and on Monday we heard that he has now been admitted in the ICU. the latest report says that he has not presented with pneumonia and he's not on a ventilator. So I just am bringing attention to this case to say, let's say if his doctors decided to try hydroxychloroquine on him, then they wouldn't need to give him azithromycin because he doesn't have pneumonia. You see the distinction? However, were he to develop that, then they would have to try that out. So, of course, a lot of people are rooting for him, as am I, but, my thoughts and prayers go out to all patients who are suffering from COVID-19, everyone who has been hospitalized and who are suffering from acute respiratory distress syndrome in the ICU, with ventilators. We are all rooting for you. We're all here praying for you. Okay, so now my next question that I had ties into this, and I talked about how the virus is called SARS-CoV-2. So the disease, coronavirus, Chinese coronavirus, or Wuhan coronavirus, they've given it an official name of COVID-19, which is coronavirus disease 19, because it was detected in late 2019. And the organism causing it is a new form of a coronavirus. Corona means head, and I'm sure you've seen the images of this particular virus. It has, these little spikes all around it on its head. That's why it's called coronavirus. It occurs naturally in animals, not in human beings. So a DNA spillover event took place, and it jumped basically from bats to human beings. It's thought to have an intermediate organism, which is a pangolin or scaly anteater. And this virus is called a SARS-CoV-2, as I said. Now, I have written and I've reported, I've gone on the initial reporting saying that this spillover event, so basically it jumped from one species to another, happened in a Wuhan wet market. Now, wet market is an open air market where animals are freshly slaughtered and sold for meat. Now you have the normal, the usual livestock, chickens and cows and sheep. You also have dogs and cats, which in other countries are considered as pets, but are sold for meat there. And there is a very lucrative wildlife trade in China. So you have exotic animals like tigers and peacocks, snakes, pangolins, who are also sold there. Now the hygiene levels, obviously you can imagine, are very poor. All these animals, they're alive, but they're maintained in very poor conditions. It's very, very unhygienic, and then they're all killed there, so you can imagine all the blood and fluids. What a big mess. So the initial reporting said that that's where the DNA spillover event happened. Basically, DNA recombination jumped from one species to another. And now there are some reports saying that there is a facility known as the Wuhan Virology Center, which is nearby, and they study, obviously, viruses. There are some reports that animals that were used for testing are then sold into the wet market, so there's some thing that could have happened. As you know, the country of China is run very strictly by an authoritarian communist party, so we don't know. We don't have access to the truth, and reports that come out of there really need to be taken with a truckload of salt. Just today we heard that there are no more new coronavirus cases in China. I find that very, very hard to believe. But let's come back to SARS-CoV-2. Why is this such a dangerous virus, and why is COVID-19 spreading in the way that it is? So if we look at the 21st century, this is the third event of this nature to have occurred. The first one happened in 2003, was called SARS, and that virus is now known as SARS-CoV-1, or just SARS-CoV. Then in 2008, 2009, we had the swine flu, that was the H1N1, and now again we have SARS-CoV-2. So SARS-CoV-1 and SARS-CoV-2, this one that happened in 2003, are very closely related, very, very closely related at a molecular level. They both originated in bats, and they jumped to an intermediate animal and then jumped to human beings. So what happened with SARS-CoV-1? That particular virus, when it infected a human being, it would go straight to the lungs and start infecting our lung cells. So immediately the patient, the infected person, would present with coughing, difficulty in breathing. And you would immediately know, okay, there's something very wrong with this person, and then that person would be quarantined. And in that sense, the virus made itself known very quickly, and so it was quarantined into oblivion. That's why you were able to identify that and control it in a different way. SARS-CoV-2, on the other hand, infects our throat cells. But when it infects your throat cells, it doesn't lead to a sore throat, or any kind of symptoms whatsoever. So a person who is infected with it remains asymptomatic for up to 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But at this time, although he or she is asymptomatic, they are shedding the virus, which means they are infecting other people. And then in some people, especially ones who have an already compromised immune system, because whether it's they have a structural lung disease like COPD, they have underlying chronic conditions like diabetes or heart disease, hypertension, so they are already at a disadvantage. Then from the throat, it descends into the lungs, and it then infects it, and you start coughing, you have labored breathing, you have high fever, and then you become symptomatic. So that's the major difference between the SARS-CoV-1 and CoV-2. It's almost as if, well, I've been reading more and more about virology and how viruses are these very ancient organisms, but they have sort of an evil genius to it, if you think about it. They're dead, they're not alive, but they find ways to self-preserve. So if you actually look at it as the next generation from SARS-CoV-1 to CoV-2, CoV-2 is more effective because it's able to hide. It's able to hide in asymptomatic humans for weeks, giving an opportunity to then spread to others. So that's why this is something that is, we're just now finding out about it. I expect a vaccine to take very long. Why? Because it's very important for us to make sure that we get it right. I've talked about this example before, what happened in the 1970s when then the president was Gerald Ford, and there was a scare that there was going to be a swine flu epidemic, maybe a pandemic. They rushed to have a vaccine. It was out in 10 months, and Ford said that we want every American, every man, woman, and child to be vaccinated. And we had just millions vaccinated because they wanted to be safe and protect themselves. But the vaccine wasn't properly tested, and it led in many cases, hundreds and hundreds of Americans got a very paralyzing condition called Guillain-Barré syndrome. And how many people actually got the swine flu? 200. So that it didn't turn out to be the epidemic that it was, and the cure, the supposed cure, because it was rushed to market, caused more damage than the actual problem, the actual scare did. So in terms of a vaccine, people are saying 18 months. I would say 2 years. Personally, I would say 2 years to have a vaccine that, as I said at the top of the hour, you need two things. You need demonstrated efficacy, and you need an acceptable safety profile. You obviously can't have a crazy autoimmune disease or paralyzing nerve condition result because of rushing this vaccine to the market. So I would say that waiting for a vaccine is not the answer. We need a therapeutic regime. And I would say right now our best case is large-scale clinical trials of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin with patients who present with pneumonia. Because we have good science, we don't have great science. When you have large clinical trials showing that it actually does work and doesn't have any side effects, then you know that you're on track. And we don't have to discover a new drug. This drug has been around for decades. I mean, how amazing would it be if this actually was able to cure the disease once and for all? How amazing would that be? So those are my first 2 points. My third one, I'm gonna beat the drum on this, as I said, because it's a very, very important measure, and that is ending the plastic bag ban that Vermont is going to implement starting from the 1st of July. We have seen Democratic Party run states and cities, right from San Francisco, which reversed its 13-year ban on plastic bags. Now, San Francisco has said that it prohibits reusable shopping bags and has gone ahead with allowing plastic bags. We've seen Albuquerque, New Mexico do it. We've seen Maine do it. We've seen Massachusetts do it. Why not Vermont? Now, why am I saying that this is important? Because as I discussed in this series today, this is a very infectious disease. It spreads through asymptomatic people. And so it's very important that we slow the contagion. If we have shut down Vermont's economy, if Governor Phil Scott and Congressman Peter Welch have said that we are willing to sacrifice the economy for months, quote months, just to slow the contagion, just to prevent, not just to, but to slow the contagion and to prevent Vermonters from overwhelming the hospitals, and it's absolutely critical that we take every single measure to put safety first and to prioritize public health. And so allowing our grocery workers who are working in the stores, allowing our Vermonters on the front lines to subject them to these disgusting, I'm sorry to say, but really disgusting reusable bags that are nothing but reservoirs of germs. I don't think that's right at all. All you have to do is say, you know what, we're pulling back the ban. We're suspending it until further notice. You know, I understand that there's an environmental agenda behind that, a policy agenda behind that, but we are in the midst of a pandemic. And if you're willing to say that large box retailers like Walmart and Costco and all these other places are not allowed to sell what you consider is non-essential items, then why not protect our frontline workers, our grocery workers? Why not protect them? In this case, plastic protects. So I'm beating the drum on this over and over, tweeting at the governor, tweeting at everybody, and trying to make a fuss about it. Now, the governor has said it's not up to him to do anything about this. It's up to the legislature. I don't know. I don't understand the politics of that, or the policy position. I don't understand how that works, because Governor Sununu in New Hampshire was able to do it. He used his executive authority to say that grocery stores have to give plastic bags. Today, there was an article in the New York Post calling on New York Governor Andrew Cuomo to exercise his executive authority and remove their impending plastic bag ban. So I don't know why, and only in the state of Vermont, it doesn't fall under the executive authority of the governor. But whatever the reasons are, I really hope that the Senate President and the Speaker prioritize this. I've mentioned this in earlier episodes. I had an off-the-record conversation with a State House journalist, and they have been asking Tim Ashe, he's the Senate President, and Mitzi Johnson, the Speaker of the House. Both of them have said that this is not a priority. Working on lifting and pulling back the ban to prioritize the safety of our grocery workers is not a priority. I don't understand that at all. But that's where we are. In closing, I'll say that I asked on our Facebook page, I've asked Vermonters, how has this shutdown affected them and their families economically? And I'm very sorry and very sad to hear that many have said that they have lost their jobs. As of today, as of this week, 60,000 Vermonters have filed for unemployment claims. 60,000. And this number is just going to increase. I've said this before, I'll keep saying it again. Public health and the economy are two sides of the same coin. And so there are going to be health consequences with depression, increase in suicide, alcoholism, drug addiction, and that entire gamut of public health consequences that comes from an extended economic shutdown of Vermont. We are already went into this crisis with a structurally weak economy. We've already gone into it with a dying private enterprise. And as I hear more and more stories of more and more Vermonters losing their jobs, and with more and more hardships and uncertainty looming, I'm very sorry and very sad to hear that. I will be here every day, 6 to 6:30. What I can do is share my healthcare expertise, and I can talk about various aspects of the COVID-19 crisis. I also want to be able to unpack current affairs that are relevant to Vermont. If there's anything that I can personally do, please reach out to me at info@Hansen, HANSEN, for Vermont spelled out.com, or leave your comments here in Facebook, on our Facebook page. We check it all the time. People have asked us, how are we campaigning in the time of coronavirus? I don't think that, well, we are in a very sobering and unprecedented time, and I don't think that it is right to be fundraising. I'm very, very respectful, and I'm sensitive to Vermonters' finances, and so we're not asking for any small dollar donations whatsoever. I'm not soliciting any money. Of course, we've had some Vermonters very generously support us. I have accepted those checks. They are small dollar checks, but again, this is not something that we're going to be doing. So how are we campaigning? Well, it's two ways actually. The first and foremost one is technology. Trying to reach out to as many people as I can through Facebook Live. We've also been doing video conferencing, and my hope and my goal is to have town hall style webinars for Vermonters in each town, for each county, if that's possible. I mean, this is very new. We're learning as we go, but the idea is to reach out to all the town chairs in each county, and then have webinars for, let's say, Chester, for example. Then everybody in Chester who wants to come on in and ask questions and have a dialogue. And that's what we're working toward in terms of how we're campaigning, if you want to call it that. I look at it as a way to reach out and connect with Vermonters. And the second aspect is, well, I would be doing this if I wasn't running for Lieutenant Governor, and that is to use my healthcare expertise, my professional expertise that lies at the intersection of medicine, public health, health policy, and Vermont politics, use it with my writings and these Facebook live streaming series to be of value and be of service to Vermonters. If I can answer questions, if I can untangle the complicated data statistics that we are subjected to every day, then I'll know that that's a job well done for today. And that's my goal, and that's what I'm trying to do. I would do it if I wasn't running, but I am running, and that's kind of all coming together. It's just, how can I be of service? So as I said, please reach out to me on email. I'll be here again tomorrow at 6 p.m. Please join us then. Thank you.